An ITV News investigation has found that nearly 200 babies who died at church-run homes for unmarried mothers are buried in unmarked graves across England. The burials, dating from the 1950s through to the 1970s, were often carried out in secret without the knowledge of their families. Our findings are from Freedom of Information requests we made about 8 former homes. But there were once more than 150 of them across the country, and campaigners say that what we've discovered may just be the tip of the iceberg. It follows our investigation earlier this year, which found a mass unmarked grave in Cumbria containing 45 babies. After watching that report, a woman who was born at a maternity home in North London contacted us. She's told us how she's carried the stigma of being born out of wedlock with her ever since. Our social affairs correspondent, Sarah Corker, has this special report.
And I knew that was the last time I would ever see him.
Babies taken, mothers traumatised, lives changed forever.
And I just would like to know who he is.
Our 6-month investigation has already revealed historic abuse at homes for unmarried mothers.
I haven't fully ever recovered from that experience.
And babies buried in unmarked graves in Cumbria.
If there's more babies in here, how much of this has gone on in the UK?
Now we have new chilling evidence exposing the scale of this cruelty. Burial records obtained by ITV News through a series of Freedom of Information requests reveal that nearly 200 babies are buried in unmarked graves across England. Burials that often took place in secret without even the family's knowledge. The babies were born and died in homes for unmarried mothers. Our evidence shows burials connected to at least 5 Church of England-run homes, dozens of unmarked graves in Cumbria, Northampton, Aylesbury, Brentwood and Winchester. 24 infants died at a Salvation Army home in Newcastle called Hope Dean. The infants are buried in unmarked graves in 4 different cemeteries. 2 Catholic-run homes, one in Kendal and one in North London, called St Pelasia's, where 37 infants are buried in unmarked graves. The records don't say how they died.
It's just absolutely harrowing. It's the worst of the worst, isn't it?
Margaret was born at St Pelasia's, a home run by nuns in the 1950s. We showed her our findings.
Nobody chooses to be born there, and it's just so sad. Those girls were looked on as the dregs of society, and their offspring very much the same.
In the 1950s, 60s and 70s, it's estimated 250,000 women, many unmarried teenagers, were sent away to mother and baby homes, many of them coerced into putting their babies up for adoption. Margaret never met her birth mother and only recently discovered her own personal records.
One of the things on it that really hurt me, it said, "It can hear." I was considered coloured. Coloured was the phrase then. Biracial now, of course. And I wasn't considered correct for adoption through the home.
A story of a very difficult start to life, in fact.
The first 3 years of Margaret's life were spent in an orphanage and then foster care.
Social services, children's department, all the different departments, etc.
Our investigation has taken us across England. I'm on my way to Lancaster University to meet a historian who spent years studying these institutions.
Were infant mortality rates within these homes high?
Yes. If you are passing through a mother and baby home, there is a more likelihood of you not surviving because you're unmarried and because you're in a space which is effectively cut off from the wider health and social care system more broadly.
We showed him our evidence of nearly 200 unmarked baby graves.
That's pretty harrowing.
He believes the true figure could be much higher.
What does this information tell us about how these children were treated? It's the fact that so many are dying.
I think it shows once they no longer are desirable and that they're no longer able to be passed off as somebody else's as part of this adoptive family, that they're treated substandardly and they're not being afforded access to modern medical care which a legitimate child at this time would have had.
At that time, being pregnant outside of wedlock was the ultimate taboo. In 1962, June was a childcare officer. She says without access to council housing or an income, single mothers had few choices. She recalls collecting infants from mother and baby homes.
I know I took babies. I know I was given babies. It's a terrible thought, isn't it? I had mothers handing their babies over to me. And that's something you never forget.
June says the policies at that time could be cruel.
I have awful thoughts, really, that the norm was adopters didn't want black children and didn't want disabled children. But of course, also they were white adopters, weren't they? We were not looking for black adopters.
What impact would you say this has had throughout your life?
I say I carry a hole in my soul with it. You're marked, you carry that stigma, you carry it for the rest of your life, the repercussions of it.
It is a dark period in our nation's recent history, and those affected now want the government to acknowledge its role in this scandal.
Sarah, what your work has exposed is just dreadful, isn't it? But just normal practice at the time. What's been the response from the organisations involved then?
It is distressing, and I have spent the last 6 months investigating these institutions. Now, the Church of England and the Salvation Army have both said they were deeply saddened to hear of the traumatic experiences of mother and babies. They described it as a tragedy and said they will help anyone who wants to get access to their personal records. Now, Margaret, who you heard in my report there, she was born in a home that was run by an order of Catholic nuns. They've said that their thoughts are with all of those affected. But they said because homes closed so many decades ago, it is quite challenging to find the relevant information. But there is a growing campaign by birth mothers to get a formal government apology for the state's role in all of this. They want on record that they did not willingly give up their children. They say they were pressured, they were coerced, they were forced to do so. The Department of Education have described this practice as abhorrent. They said it should never have happened, and they say they are looking at what extra support they can provide to those affected. But it's worth saying that this is nearly identical to the statement that the government sent me 6 months ago when I first did a report on this, and birth mothers, campaigners say that there's no sense of urgency. Many of them are now in their 70s and 80s, and time is not on their side.
OK, Sarah, many thanks.